Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Energy News Beat podcast. My name's Stuart Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group. I'll tell you what, this is absolutely an amazing day on the news desk. Let's go through the stories. First one, let's go to the collapse of the Green Revolution. This was actually on a podcast this morning on the Energy Realities with Irina Slav, Tammy Nemeth, David Blackman, myself, and we had a special guest, Robert Bryce. It was an outstanding podcast, but the collapse of the Green Revolution, and he's the man who would know. UK oil and gas, too legit to quit even for labor. We're going to stay in the UK. The UK pivot to AI is doomed from the start. You can't buy this kind of entertainment. We're going to stroll over to Canada. Whitecap and Verdin merge to create a U.S. $10 billion Canadian light oil producer. I always love a good Canadian story. Then we're going to end up with President Trump, how a natural gas became America's most important export, a key export for President Trump's rebalancing of trade. Again, you got to love a good tariff story. So let's start with the energy realities. Our first guest for today was unbelievable, Robert Bryce. Robert has been on the podcast a couple times, and he is a true energy legend in the United States, and quite honestly, he's known around the world. He's an author. He's had 2 docuseries. He really knows his stuff. And some of the key points that we talked on is Texas and the green hydrogen collapse, the Osage wind farm dismantlement. And this was a huge win for the Oklahoma Osage tribe. But this brings up a very big point that we talked about on the podcast. And that is we are seeing the dismantling of funding and subsidies for the renewable energy sector all across the board. And none of the wind farm folks would actually put in, or solar farm, land reclamation in the beginning part of their bid because they knew it'd be too expensive. Just watch, in the next couple of years, we are going to see a major, I'm talking major problem with wind farms that go out of business, bankruptcies, solar farm, and all these things. Who's going to do the land reclamation? And this Osage tribe was just one of the discussion points that we had there. And so it's going to be very important. Take a look at BP's shift away from green energy. And then the green energy collapse was one of them. So it was a wonderful, you can find it on theenergynewsbeat.substack.com. So again, thank you, Robert, for stopping by the Energy Realities podcast. Let's go to the UK oil and gas, too legit to quit. The Labour government under Keith Starmer has upheld its promise to halt oil and gas exploration, but is now allowing tiebacks, connecting new reserves to existing fields. Seems like a sleight of hand here. When the Labour Party, Keith Starmer, won the latest UK elections, it vowed to stop new oil and gas exploration. But if you're in the general area and you think that there's oil, they're in such an energy crisis that you're going to see this sleight of hand coming around. With the green energy policies, we see deindustrialization. With the green energy policies, I'm just releasing the George McMillan article, and it is on, if you go to energynewsbeat.co and then go to the upper left, search for George McMillan, you'll see on there, it's called the 7P plan, how the left got here from the 60s to now. It is all part of the plan. So if you think that you're a green energy person, you're actually being manipulated. It's pretty cool to see that. The government acknowledges that changes to the oil and gas fiscal regime in recent years have led to a period of uncertainty in the sector and its investors. Treasury said in a statement, this is the UK's Treasury, that part of the consultation papers, yet another good sign for the UK's energy. They're going to stop the windfall profits tax after 2030. They're not going to have an oil and gas industry by then. They're absolutely going to go out. People are going to, oil and gas companies are going to be fleeing the UK. Staying in the UK for some entertainment, let's go to UK pivot to AI is doomed from the start. This is by David Gerard, author of the book Attack of the 50-Foot Blockchain and Cryptocurrency and Blockchain News of the same title. This is pretty funny. Government bureaucracy generates paperwork and even more paperwork when it's computerized. But human judgment is expensive. What if a computer could go through the paperwork instead? Well, I'm going to just say this right here. I like the idea. We found that Doge has gone through the United States system, but it's who is programming the AI. The AI that I've seen can be just as corrupt as people. Now, if it's a tool and it's a search algorithm, so let's say that you're Nancy Pelosi, just as an example, and you go out and you do an investment and you start going through and saying, how does this play in? AI can go through and then take a look at your bank account, cross reference, and do that kind of stuff. But it's who's driving that you really have to take a look at to see whether or not corruption's going on. I think that this author has got some really good points on here. Starmer's press release claims the International Monetary Fund estimates that AI will improve productivity by 1.5% per year. But this turned out to be far from an IMF report that was skeptical of Goldman Sachs report making this claim. The Goldman Sachs report says that electricity and personal computers raise GDP by this much. I'm going to throw this squirrel into this argument, and that is when you sit back and take a look at the amount of power that AI is going to take, the amount of cost, the amount of development, the amount of data centers, and UK has been now merged with the left, under the left's policies, and even their right wing, supposedly conservative, have been acting like left and they've been deindustrialized. So they are not going to have the money, resources, or the capability of implementing AI credibly. So buckle up for the UK. Let's go to this story with Whitecap and Veren merged to create a US $10 billion Canadian light oil producer. Whitecap Resources and Veren entered into a 10.4 all-share merger, creating a major Canadian oil condensate producer. Combined company will have an enterprise value of 10.4 billion and produce 370,000 barrels of equivalent per day. This is huge. I think this is absolutely fantastic. The merger will create the largest light Canadian focused oil producer and a significant player in the Kaybob, Duvernay, and Alberta Montney regions. Very significant. I'm very happy for them, and I got this story from oilprice.com. And let's go to the last story here, how natural gas has become America's most important export, a key export for President Trump's rebalancing of trade. I'm going to give Steve Reese and Reese Consulting a shout out right now. And one of the key things that Robert Bryce, they are a sponsor of today's podcast, but Robert Bryce, as I mentioned in our first story, brought up a critical point is natural gas. I brought up a key point, and that is natural gas power plants can come online faster and easier than nuclear reactors. But Robert Bryce was saying there is a training issue and lack of training in the United States that is going to hit critical mass very quickly. Well, our folks over there at Reese Energy Consulting are fabulous training organization. So if you need labor and you need them trained, contact Steve Reese at Reese Consulting, engineeringconsulting.com, and you will get some good answers. So let's go to this story here. I'll tell you what, U.S. takes the lead, ripping up old alliances, and the post-World War II axis on its head would have been impossible for any previous American president because the insatiable U.S. thirst for imported energy. but the Trump White House is able to lean on increasingly critical made in America commodity to expert new levels of geopolitical leverage. Let's take a look at Japan just as a matter of fact. If you've got a trade imbalance, there is a trade imbalance with, just say, Canada. Canada has got tariffs on U.S. products, and so we can't equally trade there. And Tammy Nemeth from the Nemeth report had a very valid point that if they did not do that, they wouldn't have any manufacturing here, but they should have gotten their LNG and exporting oil, and then they would have been able to counterbalance all this kind of thing. So you had the left's policies cripple Canada's negotiations on this. But when you want to take a look at how President Trump is going to use LNG as an export, you don't see any Fords in the EU in Europe. You don't see any Chevys. You don't see any Dodge Ram pickups anywhere. It's because they're tariffed. And so what are people buying? They need LNG. So if they're going to be putting in long-term contracts, they're going to turn around and say, "Wait a minute, we're buying this amount of energy from you, and therefore we don't need a tariff." That's okay, but we're going to have to find out how fast we can ramp, how much money we can export, what's that going to do for our prices internally to power, how fast, there's a lot of questions. So you can see I've got about 9 articles I'm working on right now. And so there's a lot of questions as we go through here. You can just say drill, baby, drill, but it's drill, baby, drill when fiscally responsible. But we're also going to have to see how fast we can ramp up. And I guarantee you, though, Doug Burgum, Chris Wright, and Lee Zeldin is definitely the team that can ramp this animal up as fast as they possibly can. So, with that, like, subscribe, go to theenergynewsbeat.substack.com, go to energynewsbeat.com. And if you want to find out how I'm making 30% on my money, it's actually 32% on my oil and gas investments. There's a form up there that says, "How's your portfolio?" Anyway, thank you. Like, subscribe, share, read this to your pets. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.